panel today is comprised of representatives from the group purchasing organizations in the country. Our moderator of the panel is Todd Ebert, President and CEO of the Healthcare Supply Chain Association. Todd has been a friend of mine for many, many years, and he was gracious enough to help me organize this panel. He has been instrumental in helping a lot of companies navigate the GPO world. But he is nationally recognized supply chain leader. For those of you who don't know, Intermountain Healthcare had a GPO of their own, Amerinet, that is now called Intelair. Did I say that right? Intelair, and Todd was the head of that. And so he's been a Utahn. He's been involved with Intermountain Healthcare, but his professional experiences, he's actually a pharmacist. He's done a lot in that area, so he knows our industry well. He holds a Master of Science degree in pharmacy administration, but more importantly, we claim him as part of Utah. So he may live back in Missouri now, but we claim him as part of Utah. So I'm going to turn the time over to Todd. He's going to introduce the panel, and then we'll have opportunity for question and answer at the end, hopefully. But Todd, take it away.
Thank you, Kelvin. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for that kind introduction. And yes, I am a Utahn, native roots here, but it's been, I think, Kelvin, 33 years since I've lived in St. Louis, so there's a little bit of Midwesterner in me too. But it's always nice to come back here. And in fact, I told Kelvin when I finally found the convention, the portion of the convention hall, it's a good thing you had those little signs so I knew where I was going, because I haven't been in this convention center for a long time. But we're glad to be here. And I'm excited to be part of this discussion with you today with a couple of individuals that I think are on the tops of what happens in the group purchasing arena. We have Chad Mitchell from Vizient and Eric Sawim from Health Trust. And they will be part of the dialogue today. In fact, they're the people that I'll ask questions to. But we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Our goal today is to help you understand what GPOs do, a little bit of education, and also, very importantly, how to be successful working with a GPO. Just once you get a contract, there's still much more to do. And then you also have to understand how this whole process goes forward, because everything that a GPO does has a reason behind it. And as I share with you, those reasons many times are driven by their membership, i.e. those providers that use a GPO. So let me just start from this standpoint and ask both Eric and Chad just to take a moment to introduce themselves, as well as a little bit about their organizations. Then we'll get into some other questions.
Good afternoon, folks. Chad Mitchell with Vizient. For those who are not familiar with Vizient, we're the largest healthcare performance improvement company based out of Dallas, Texas. We partner with more than 60% of the acute healthcare market, just about 30% of the non-acute market. We also partner with 98% of academic healthcare systems. To give some scope to the vast amount of spend that we help manage on behalf of our members, we manage more than $130 billion worth of annual spend with our membership. I've been with the organization for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I worked for a large healthcare distributor. I have oversight and responsibility over our national contracting team responsible for medical, surgical, as well as healthcare distribution. Again, happy to be here today, and Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Chad. So Eric Sawim, Vice President of Strategic Sourcing at Health Trust. So Health Trust, we are the third largest GPO behind Vizient. We manage about $54 billion in annual spend through our membership. Two things that are unique about us. Number one is we're member-owned. So we're the only GPO out there that is actually owned by our membership. 7 of our members actually own Health Trust, with HCA being the managing owner of the GPO. And then secondly, we also run HCA's supply chain. And so as a GPO, we are operator-led in everything we do, because the decisions that we make impact the supply chain from an HCA perspective. I've been at Health Trust for about a year now, so I'm officially a GPO guy. Prior to that, I was at Texas Children's for 8 years. running their sourcing, purchasing, equipment planning team. So Chad will have the perspective of a supplier, and I'll have the perspective of a member and operator.
And Chad, you were part of the Owens and Minor network when you moved over to Vizient, correct?
Right.
All right, great. Just a question that these guys don't know what's coming. I'm starting right out of the basic blocks on this. Just quickly, you know the answer to this, but just quickly, how would you describe how a GPO works? Not from the new and innovative, but from the standpoint of aggregating, purchasing volume, working with your members, et cetera. But just real briefly, so there's a basic understanding of what we do.
Yeah, and Chad and I were actually talking to two individuals before this. I'm going to throw you a curveball. I'm going to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about why health systems use GPOs. What's the value prop that a GPO brings from their perspective? And then that way, as we go through our process, you can have an understanding of why health systems are kind of bought into that process. So if you think about a health system, I'll take Texas Children's as the example since I used to work there. They're buying about 32,000 to 40,000 unique items every single year. There's a large amount of spend going through those items, but if you think about the amount of vendors and amount of items that they have to essentially contract for or establish a price point for, it's a lot. It takes a lot of people to negotiate those legal terms and conditions, those price points, and then to effectively manage those suppliers. So rather than spending the overhead on the 40,000 items, hospital systems will join group purchasing organizations and essentially pay to be a part of those GPOs, and then they get access to our entire portfolio. So they don't have to spend overhead on negotiating all of the different contracts. So they'll spend their hours negotiating maybe their most important or their largest agreements, and then they'll access the GPOs for the majority of that portfolio. So just a little bit of background on the value prop.
Yeah, and I think it's important to call out those benefits resonate with the supplier as well, right? So sometimes the question will come up, well, why would a supplier look to join a GPO? And those benefits in terms of having one contract that they enter into with the national GPO on behalf of a number of health systems provides a lot of scale and a lot of efficiencies for the supplier community as well.
So I'll go now answer your question. Sorry about that. So from a GPO side, how does it work? So I have responsibility of our surgery and distribution portfolio within Health Trust. And at Health Trust, we're extremely, just like Vizient, very member-driven in our decision-making. So we have a little over 10 clinical committees. And then on the service side, think about your EVS, financial services. We have some additional committees. So we have close to about 20 different committees. And all of those committees are made up of our membership, right? So it's not a bunch of GPO people sitting in a room deciding, okay, which vendors are we essentially going to contract with? What's the different award statuses that we are going to do? All of the data points on who should we include, what do we need to consider, and how we should look at categorizing our different agreements is member-driven. So at the beginning of the process, what we do is we typically start from, we call it intake, but we'll look at the agreements that are either upcoming for expiration based off of our work plan, and we'll do a kickoff, right, internally. We'll look at our internal supplier portal to see if any new companies have emerged within that space that have submitted that they want to participate in the bid process. And we'll essentially scope the category, right? Figure out where our customers are spending money within this category. Have they talked about interest in any other additional suppliers or any additional things out there? And we'll kind of get a baseline for the GPO of what we want to look for when we go to market. We'll go to market in what's called an RFI, right? And we'll get an understanding of a baseline of where all of that spend is going from the vendor perspective. And then we'll essentially solicit offers. Now, it's important to know that when we solicit offers, we're not only looking at price, right? We're looking at the clinical aspects of the individual category. We're looking at the supply chain makeup of the different vendor organizations, right? Is stuff coming from Israel and only coming from Israel? That's probably bad right now, so we need to understand that. What distribution methods or delivery methods the different companies offer through the distribution channel or through the direct channel, and we evaluate all of that. And kind of parallel to that too, we have a physician network of about 400 individuals that are made up of our different membership. We have about 1,800 facilities that we pull from that make up that membership. And we get relevant clinical feedback during that process from both the physician network and the clinicians that sit on the different advisory boards. And so ultimately, through that process, we get to a decision on which vendors we're going to award. Now, it's important to know that that's the GPO process. And so parallel to that, what a lot of the different members will do is they will go through a very similar process on their side through their value analysis committees to align on the decision that the GPO is making is also the right decision for their organization.
Thank you.
Let me add to that just real quick. You guys have a public domain for your bid calendar?
We do.
Okay, and we do too at Vizient. So you guys can all access via our website, via Health Trust as well, public bid calendar broken down across every category that we contract for.
Thanks, Chad and Eric. And just as a little background from my perspective, when I ran Amerinet, we would make sure that that public calendar was available on our website, and we would encourage all suppliers to take a look at that. It was accurate based upon when timing was coming up, and it also explained the process relative to help us understand what your organization does and how you operate. Extremely important, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So thank you. Hopefully that was helpful in understanding a bit of what GPOs do. Now let's look at this from the new or innovative supplier that has new in the marketplace or has an innovative product or equipment, like the Mattia stuff today. I thought it was pretty cool. But anyway, so Chad and Eric, could you kind of tell us, what your new and innovative pathway technology and for suppliers looks like, and then we'll get into a few other questions about that as well.
So I'll start with this one. I'm sure our processes are going to be similar. At Vizient, we have a whole department dedicated to innovative technology. Once a year, we hold an innovative technology fair where we encourage all of our suppliers who are trying to bring innovative technology to market to come stand and demo their items in front of our clinical staff. Like Health Trust, we also have councils made up of clinical staff members, more than 450 of them that are all invited to this annual fair. At that point in time, they will evaluate the product and they will determine whether or not that feels innovative within the space for which they're qualifying for. Okay, a supplier does not need to wait until that fair. That may benefit them to take part in that fair so that they can demonstrate the features, the benefits of their products, but they can also act in a virtual capacity throughout the year. That provides a unique and an alternative path to market that allows a supplier to bypass our traditional bid model. So really important to know that that avenue is out there from an innovative technology standpoint.
Yeah, and I echo everything Chad just said. We also have Innovation Technology Summit on the Health Trust side. And similar to Chad, we have a process for evaluating innovative technology. It's slightly different. So on the Health Trust side, same supplier portal. So I recommend, you'll hear me give plugs for the supplier portal throughout this session. So just the same place to go to access the bid calendar. If you have a piece of innovative technology, you can submit that through the supplier portal. And our clinical services team, so similar team that's dedicated to innovative technology and clinical research throughout our RFP processes and mid-cycle, will review that technology in tandem with clinicians on my team and others and determine if that technology is in fact innovative from our definitions, right? And so what that means is it changing the way that a physician performs that procedure, right? Is it providing different clinical outcomes relative to that individual procedure? And we'll get feedback from the physicians as well during that process. And then every Friday, I go to a meeting. It's at 8 a.m. on Friday, so I'm going to get back to Nashville, and that's the first meeting I'm going to go to, and we review the intake of those submissions. Right now, I think tomorrow we have 9 to review. And what we'll look at is, okay, do we have any spend within our membership, right? Is that innovative technology already hit the market? If it has, let's get feedback from those members. Is this truly something that is different and is innovative? And if the answer is yes and yes, then right then and there, we're probably going to jump on it to contract for, because it's something that we're already seeing adoption for. If we don't see spend within our group purchasing organization, our membership, then we start to ask questions on, okay, how early are you in the process, with this innovative technology? Are you looking for feedback, or are you ready to go to market, essentially? And we'll meet with the supplier, we'll understand timing, with our bid calendar and when the right time is to evaluate your technology.
Oftentimes, a question that comes up is how long the innovative tech bids are for. At Vizient, they are traditional 3-year contract terms with 2 optional 1-year extensions. Now, that's subject to change if that innovative technology item may be a part of a broader category, and that category is going to go out to bid, let's say in 2 years. There's a possibility that supplier determines that it's in their best interest to go to bid as well.
Just one other quick question along that process. Both organizations, I believe, have new technology clauses in their contracts. I know we did it at Marinette a number of times. We would inform a supplier in a particular category that, oh, by the way, that we're going to add another organization into our portfolio. They many times didn't like that, but the question that I'm asking is it sounds like this is a dynamic process.
That door is always open at
Yes.
Vizient.
And that's a great point. And Chad and I will sit up here and say the same thing to answering the question of, we want competition, right? We want a diverse portfolio. We want the portfolio that our membership wants. The clinicians at the end of the day are making the decisions. We are simply the gates for them to access the products that they want to buy, right, at the end of the day. So anything we can do to make our portfolio more innovative, more in line with the clinical expectations that they have, we're going to do it. I mean, we send our clinicians to different conferences that aren't Health Trust sponsored for the exact reason that our expectation is they come back with 100 business cards, right, of companies that maybe we haven't heard of, but maybe we do need to get more familiar with. So yes, we also do have new technology clauses. Similar to that, we have minority-owned business clauses. We have domestic supplier manufacturing clauses. So those 3 things will give us the ability, regardless of the award status of our particular agreement, to add vendors mid-cycle without having to bid that agreement out.
No different on our end.
All right, great. Now let's take that just a little bit deeper. And that is, okay, we've got some, I'm imagining, I'm probably right, some new innovative medical device vendors in our audience. What do you recommend they do?
So I'm in a supplier portal, number 1. Go out there and register, right? It's helpful to know, when the categories are up for bid. You have access to the form, and you'll also understand relevant information about our companies, right? And how we operate and who our members are. So that's kind of first and foremost. The second thing is take advantage of these conferences, right? If we are hosting conferences for suppliers to come out and showcase their innovative technology, we want you to come there. And then the third thing is, other conferences that are out there that are not either Health Trust or Vizient specific. As I stated before, we send our team members to those. Think of conferences like Federation, AORN, and different conferences like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is no different for Health Trust, but I would also highly encourage you, if you do go out to the Vizient website and see our bid calendar, you're going to see the category manager's name. We have more than 70 category managers across Vizient who specifically have a subset of categories that they're responsible for. They can be your biggest advocate. So please, 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 they all report up respectively to Eric and I for our respective organizations, but please get in touch with them. They can really help you maneuver and navigate this process.
How important is it for a potential supplier to get on the phone or email or to communicate with your organization? Chad, you just brought that up. And honestly, from my perspective as a former CEO of Amerinet, that was extremely important. I would encourage manufacturers to get in touch with the supply chain category managers and start that dialogue so that they know what you have and what your opportunities are. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think for an organization that it's in its infancy, or maybe a new and unique technology coming to market, that is critical. That is absolutely critical. On the Vizient side, one of the criteria through our bid process will be member preference. And if members aren't familiar with your products, that could be an area that potentially you lag on unless we help you. So please utilize that olive branch. And then we've got the ability to get you guys in front of our councils and the decision makers within the process to bring your product, send them samples so that they actually can say, hey, you know what, this is a great product. Here's how it compares with others within this category.
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, you absolutely have to take advantage of the resources that Chad and I are talking about within the GPOs through the supplier portals and understanding the bid calendar, reaching out to those contract managers, building those relationships so that then you can, then get in front of the different councils. But also, if you go to either of our websites, you can understand who a lot of our members are. And there's no better way to get on contract within a GPO than the member advocating for it, right? Like, we, at the end of the day, are not the decision makers. It is the members driving that decision. So a lot of times what will happen too is we'll go present a category and say, here are the vendors that are registered, that we've pulled spend, we've heard of, and somebody will go from our membership and go, hey, what about this company? I've talked to them a couple of times. They have something really cool. Has anyone else seen that? And sometimes we'll hear crickets, and then we'll still include them, right? And then all of a sudden we're now educating, our membership on that individual company. So that's the best way. It's also the hardest way, right? And so that's why you kind of have to approach it from both angles, in my opinion, to give yourself the optimal position to get on contract.
Thanks, Chad and Eric. It is some pretty salient advice relative to working some of the members. My guess is that, Chad, if you were to hear from, let's say, Trinity, no, that's you, Eric, from Trinity, or Chad, you from Intermountain Healthcare, you're going to start paying attention a little bit to those things, or from other smaller organizations as well. You start to hear those things, you start paying attention to them. So that's very important. All right, now you've mentioned a little bit about the value and the importance of the members. From my perspective, back in my old days, the members and the membership decision-making process was extremely valuable. If it wasn't for the membership, when I ran the pharmacy program, and I started in 1991, I ran the Intermountain Healthcare Pharmacy Purchasing Program. So that gives you a pretty quick idea how old I am. Don't do the math. But anyway, your members would literally make those decisions for you. Every once in a while, when we ran out of time, they'd say, okay, Todd, we're out of time. You can handle the antacids. And I did. Thank you very much. So explain to us how important is it for the membership and their input and the decision-making process? Because I've heard from some of your peers in your organizations that literally said, we don't do anything without them telling us what to do.
So I'll start. So Health Trust, and I didn't mention this before, but I probably should. So we're a committed model, and Vizient and the other GPOs in this space offer committed models. But essentially, what that means is our customers. We manage essentially compliance probably to our GPO agreements probably a little bit differently. Yeah. And so the member input, because of that model, is absolutely critical. And it's not just a value prop for our membership on the committed model, it's a value prop for the supplier, right? Because when we get suppliers on contract, they essentially know the membership is going to buy from those agreements given our model. And so to Todd's question, I start with that because if we don't get the right member feedback through the process, we're not awarding the right suppliers or the right mix of suppliers, and then our agreements are not successful in that category, right? And so it's absolutely critical that we have their feedback throughout the process. So I mentioned a little bit about intake and then RFI, RFP. We probably touch the different councils 4 times at least for every single category that goes through to make sure, hey, this was the information you guys gave us 9 months ago. Is it still relevant? Has it changed? This is the new information. Should we keep going, or do we need to adjust our strategy a little bit? And so we're constantly getting feedback. And then even mid-cycle, we're constantly evaluating, okay, hey, for some of our categories, we're seeing that the utilization rate really isn't that high. What's going on? Where did we miss the mark? Do we need to talk about this category again? And what's really cool about our advisory boards, and I'm sure it's no different than Chad's, is they're all peers. So they end up challenging each other, on the phone about, different vendors being utilized, if stuff's unique, kind of how they've deployed those different strategies. And it's really cool to watch that in action because we may go to a radiology advisory board or a surgery advisory board or a nursing. And so it's very different professionals all kind of challenging each other to ultimately get to the right answer.
I think that was really good, Eric. The one other thing I'd mention here is market needs change. Going back to 2020, we heard time and time again from our customer base, I need assurance. I need price assurance, and I need product, right? Then all of a sudden, domestic or stateside manufacturing became a big deal. And now I would tell you, it's back to assurance, gang. Customers are chasing the price because they're under extreme pressure, but they want to ensure that they have the right product at the right time, at the right place, at the right price. This is something, we've all heard for years and years and years, as I'm sure all of you in your respective industries, what is old is new again. And that is what is most important. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about domestic sourcing, but domestic sourcing, at least from my purview, isn't looked at necessarily the same way that it was 12, 18 months ago. Again, customers are looking at that price point, and if you're a customer or you're a supplier and you're able to demonstrate redundancy in your supply chain and you're able to promote resiliency and that you've got plenty of product on standby in case of some world event that bottlenecks the supply chain, they're going to eat that up right now.
Great points, and I can echo that from the standpoint of quality and supply are 2 of the biggest issues out there right now, and that's what they're looking for. And in fact, just very briefly, because this isn't in our script at all, but how have things changed for you and your organization post-COVID? Because it has, I expect, for everybody.
So I'll answer that from my distribution background. We've seen pre-COVID, 81% of our Vizient customers were engaging in some degree of low unit measure just-in-time ordering. Since COVID, we've seen that dynamic move by about 8 to 10%. More customers are buying in bulk, and those customers are finding or needing a place to store their product. Right? So their needs are changing. They may not have the space, they may not have the wherewithal to manage more and more of that product. They're turning to new and unique partners. They're turning to their historical partners and asking them to serve them in new and unique ways. Third-party logistics is becoming more and more of a thing. Customer-owned inventory, where they own it, the distributor doesn't, or the manufacturer doesn't, it's becoming more and more of a focus as well.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that because our changes are no different. I think pre-COVID, the average back order lines were about 5%. Okay, and if you think about a back ordered line, a buyer places an order, they say it's on back order, They have to call the manufacturer, say, hey, what's a substitute? Probably on hold for 20 minutes. They get a substitute. They walk over to their value analysis committee, who then goes to the clinicians. They get approval. They have to set up the item. They have to order the item. They have to get it in, receive it, update their par levels, right? That process I'm describing can happen within 2 hours, but typically it takes multiple days. So 5% of lines was a lot. During COVID, it was 40. It was 40% of the orders that hit a back order, and we all remember that craziness. Now it's about 15. So it really has not gotten back to the 5%. And it never will. It never will. And so to Chad's point, a lot of health systems are mitigating that risk with inventory, carrying more inventory. But on the GPO side, our members are asking for us to vet that risk and manage that risk more. So what does that mean? So you will see a lot in the GPO process. We'll ask you about what raw materials are the makeup of your products? Where do you get them? Where do you make your finished goods? How many different plants do you have making your finished goods, and what percent breakout do you have? Are you at capacity? Are you not at capacity? Because if you're at capacity and you're bidding in a GPO agreement, right, how are you going to flex up? And then what assurances are you willing to put in place contractually, right? They want to know that the vendors are going to deliver at the end of the day. And then also during mid-cycle, how are you performing against those promises that were made, right? Are your fill rates hitting the mark? How many items are you back ordering? Are you discontinuing a bunch of SKUs? So all of that stuff we monitor during cycle after we evaluate it in the sourcing process to make sure that we get the right outcomes for our members.
Yeah, and I'd just add the pedigree attributes, those things are now table stakes. They used to be voluntary, nice to have. They are now an expectation of each of our members and therefore the GPOs as well.
Yeah, and I'd just add from the pedigree standpoint, better be prepared to answer that question because they are looking at that, and it's driven by your membership is where that's coming from. It's extremely important. Let's go back to the contracting process for just a minute because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we have some questions. And that is, it's been described to me that your contracts are pretty darn thorough. How come?
So I'll start. So our contracts are pretty thorough. And the reason is one, our members expect it. I'm going to keep going back to that, right? They expect certain things in our agreements. And the reason is so they don't have to negotiate something with you separately. So if we did not have these super long documents, if you think about it, we have 1,800 hospitals, over 60,000 non-acute sites. Our contracts have to fit all of those different scenarios. They have to, work for that one physician office in Beaumont, Texas, but they also have to fit the HCAs, Trinities, Tenets, Kaisers of the world. And so in order to do that, they're very thorough, and we understand that. But the value prop to you is once you get through that, you're not having to go negotiate 100 different contracts with the different members because you've already established that. And so
and if you are, it should be perceived as an enhancement to that national. So oftentimes you're not having to replicate all 170 pages, but maybe 10 pages specific to that member.
170 pages?
Just got done with one, buddy.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Just one real quick question, because we're going to get down to our 5 to 6 minutes left, and that is distribution. Chad, you came from a distribution background. Does everything have to go through a distributor, or how do you manage your distribution in the supply chain for your customers?
No, folks, and especially in the technology sector, physician preference items, a lot of those items historically have gone direct. Now, more and more of those suppliers are opening up kind of their mindset to channeling some of them through distribution channels, but certainly that's a negotiable within the contracting process.
And I would just say that if you have a customer that wants you to go through that channel, another good way to get you into customers' GPOs, be flexible. Right? Being a smaller company, you have that advantage. With some of the larger companies Chad and I deal with, it takes 4 months and 100 people they have to talk to get something done. So use that to your advantage. If a customer wants consignment for example, or if you're offering equipment placement, agreement or something like that to get your foot in the door, don't dismiss that because you haven't historically done it. But absolutely agree. Most of the stuff we're talking about wouldn't go through distribution. It would typically come direct.
All right, thank you. We have some time for about 5 or 6 more minutes for some questions from the audience. We've got one back there.
Hey there. Thank you so much. It's been very important. I work for BD. My colleague Marty Stout is sitting next to me. I used to sell to hospitals, sell needles, syringes, IV catheters, and I benefited largely from our ability to get awards with great GPOs like yourselves. Now I'm on the innovation side and working on some projects where, in our eyes, they're highly differentiated and they're differentiated from the status quo. And so my question is a little bit about the new innovation stuff that you already mentioned, but there's a category in my head that I'm thinking of where my product, in your eyes, you would probably put it in that category, but in my eyes, it's so much different than the status quo today, and I think it should be in a new category. So could you please speak a little bit about new category creation, where there may be kind of a status quo category already in existence, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I'll start. And we don't like bundling. Let me first say that. So anytime
We can.
yeah. So anytime that we want to create we would like to create new categories, essentially, right? Because it creates new opportunities, new innovation for companies to get on board. That is a challenge, right? We get into this debate a lot, and not us up here, but essentially our clinicians, right? And that's who we really need to rely on. It can't be a business decision on if a product fits in a category we already have or if it is a new category. So what I would say is, first and foremost, if there's any inclination that we can create a new category, we're going to. And then secondly, we really rely on our clinicians to debate that internally. It's not one, it's multiple. They have discussions with the vendor. They have discussions with members to really get to that decision. If you have something specific, I'd love to talk to you about it after, and then we can chat about it.
Yeah, likewise. And I would even extend an olive branch to come in and sit down with our council as well that governs that category. I think having clinical perspective would be helpful.
But if I could add to that piece, make sure you have the data to back it up. That's one of the key things that I used to see was, oh, this is great, it's unique, it's different, and it's going to save money. Well, demonstrate to me how it will. How can we convince our clinicians that this makes sense to do?
Yeah, the difference in value prop is extremely important, right? Every single supply chain procurement person has 20 vendors that are emailing them every week that says, hey, I can save you money and I got something different. So you better be ready with the data points that represent how it is different in that elevator pitch.
Appreciate the question. Thank you.
Good question. Next question, go ahead.
I am the founder and the president of a company that's called K-Care. It's K-A-Y-K-A-R-E. I'm an occupational therapist for over 18 years, and I've innovated a new technology for shoulder braces. I've eliminated the strap pulling on the neck, and it's a faster application. It's easier for patients and also for clinicians. I do have a contract with Premier for a breakthrough technology in shoulder braces. My question to you is, how do you make it easy for suppliers with a new innovative technology to reach out to your members? And do you have field teams, or how easy it is to get to them? And the other thing is, how is it possible to meet with your councils or your managers here in Utah?
Before I leave, we'll be sure to exchange information.
Thank you. And my products are being made here in Utah.
I love how you started out with throwing the Premier gauntlet down. Way to go.
And I would just add that within the supplier portal I keep talking about, there is a list of the account managers within Health Trust on there that you can access, so you can have easy access to reach out to the right representatives on the Health Trust side to get you in contact with the right members.
My sense, too, to help answer that question, too, being here in Utah, you've probably already talked to a few HCA members, St. Mark's, maybe some Vizient members, Intermountain Healthcare, and if they are on board with this stuff, have them get a hold of these guys. That does not hurt.
Nope.
Does not hurt. All right, Kelvin.
One last question
All right, one last question from the boss.
from me.
Oh, from you. No, you don't get a question, but go
Sure,
ahead.
I do. Talk to me about sole source contracting. I know you're going to say, no, we don't do it, but
Oh, we do.
okay.
Wait, we do. But it's a great question. A lot of suppliers have asked that question since COVID. You guys going to continue to do sole source contracting? And what I would say on the Vizient side of the house is it is completely contingent to the players that exist in a space and the resiliency and the redundancy that a manufacturer combined with the value that a manufacturer can bring to the table. But we absolutely will and do contract from a sole source perspective. And in fact, we did a study earlier this year to determine how many more dual and multi-source awards we have today than pre-COVID. And King, it's not much. I mean, negligible. We're talking a few percentage points. So our contracting standards really have not changed from a sole dual, multi perspective.
And we're no different in how we look at that scenario, right? Is that market, how many players are in that market, what's the value prop that they bring, and what resiliency will they offer? And then we monitor it through, because if they don't deliver on those requirements, we automatically open it up, because our membership needs to be able to access product, and that's what's probably most important to both Vizient and at Health Trust. On the Health Trust side, there's probably a lot of when you hear Health Trust, you think sole, dual, like just very limited. Our portfolio through COVID, we've probably moved more percentage points than Vizient because of our model. We do have more dual and multis and less soles, not by a ton, but our portfolio is only 10% sole. And so, when you hear Health Trust, you think that it's more, but it's not. It's only 10%.
And it's still fair to say that all those types of decisions are made by your membership.
Yeah, absolutely, every time.
All right. How do we do, Kelvin? We're
Great.
out of time.
Let's give them a round of applause.
Hopefully we met our
Thank you,
goal
guys.
of
Yes.
helping educating you, so thank you very much.
It was very, very helpful. We really appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time to come out.